Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're really getting into something that's, well, both fascinating and honestly a bit unsettling. The bystander effect.
Absolutely. It's a concept most people have probably heard of, maybe linked to that famous Kitty Genovese case back in '64.
Exactly.
Right.
The story everyone heard was, this shocking lack of help. And the core idea that came out of it, the bystander effect, is that individuals seem less likely to jump in and help during an emergency if there were other people around.
It's that classic diffusion of responsibility. The thinking goes, oh, someone else has probably called for help, or someone else is more qualified.
Right. So nobody acts. But here's why we're digging into it today. This whole idea has massive implications for risk management professionals, like you listening now.
And especially because some of the newer research is really starting to challenge those, let's say, foundational assumptions. It's forcing a rethink.
It really is. So where did this all start, scientifically speaking?
Well, the early work, people like Darley and Latané, they did these controlled lab experiments, really groundbreaking at the time.
Yeah, I remember reading about those.
They basically showed pretty clearly in a lab setting that just having other passive people present could seriously inhibit someone from helping.
Like that experiment with the woman in distress.
That's a key one, yeah. An individual alone helped, I think it was 70% of the time, but put them with a stranger, just one other person, and that dropped to like 40%.
Wow, that's a big drop.
It is. And they broke down the process, First, you have to notice something's happening, then you have to interpret it as an actual emergency.
Which isn't always obvious.
Not at all. Then decide if it's your responsibility to act, figure out how to help, and then finally actually do it. Lots of steps where things can fall apart.
And that interpretation step, that seems crucial, like the smoke-filled room study.
Oh, yeah, classic. Yeah. Students alone reported smoke pretty quickly, put them in a group where others weren't reacting.
They just sit there looking around.
Pretty much. They took way longer and often decided it wasn't serious. Sort of, well, if they're not worried, why should I be? That's pluralistic ignorance in action.
Okay, so that's the lab picture. Yeah. But you mentioned newer research. Things that look at the real world.
Exactly. And this is where it gets really interesting, especially for risk management thinking. A major study, I think it was published in 2019, they looked at over 200 real surveillance videos from cities in the UK, the Netherlands, South Africa, actual public conflicts.
Not lab simulations, real life stuff.
Real life stuff. And what they found kind of flips the old narrative completely.
How so?
Intervention, people stepping in, was the norm, not the exception.
Really?
Yeah. And something like over 90% of these conflicts, at least one bystander, often more, did something, they intervened.
90%. That completely contradicts the simple diffusion of responsibility idea.
It does. And maybe even more surprising, having more bystanders around actually increased the chances that someone would intervene. More people meant more help, not less.
Okay, hold on. More people, more help. That's the opposite of what we thought. So what does that mean for us, for risk management professionals in, say, an organization?
Well, it's a really good question, because a street emergency is one thing, usually quick, anonymous strangers. An organization is different.
How so? The dynamics are different.
Totally. You have ongoing relationships, hierarchies, office politics, people know each other. Things often unfold slowly, not like a sudden street crisis.
And there's the fear factor, right? Not physical danger maybe, but
fear of consequences, absolutely. Yeah. People worry about damaging relationships, hurting their career, being seen as a troublemaker. That's a huge reason people might stay silent about, say, an ethics breach or a safety concern they see.
Like noticing a safety rule being ignored over and over, but nobody wants to be that guy who reports it.
Precisely. Until something bad happens that could have been prevented. But the good news is, these studies also give us clues about why people do act, even in tricky settings. Informal intervention by peers, just colleagues stepping in, can actually work. It can stop problematic behavior before it escalates into a major risk incident.
So it's not just about formal reporting channels then?
Not entirely. Those are important, definitely. But fostering a culture where peer-to-peer intervention feels safe and normal, that's powerful.
Which is where risk management can be proactive. We're seeing more bystander intervention training now, right? For safety, diversity, harassment prevention.
Yes, lots of organizations are implementing these. Like the U.S. Army's programs, for instance. It's about equipping people with the skills and, crucially, the confidence to act.
And things like Good Samaritan laws help on the legal side. reducing liability fears for helping in good faith.
True. And within organizations, having clear, confidential ways to raise concerns is vital. Things like an organizational ombudsman.
A neutral third party.
Exactly. A safe place to go without immediate fear of backlash. It shifts the focus from assuming people won't act to actively enabling them to act.
So wrapping this up, what seemed like a pretty straightforward theory, more people equals less help. It's actually much more complex.
It really is, especially when you move from the lab to the real world and into our workplaces. Context matters. Relationships matter. Culture matters.
It's not just one simple psychological quirk.
No. Which I think leads to a really crucial question for everyone listening who works in risk management.
Go on.
Beyond the policies, beyond the procedures, the checklists, how do we genuinely build a workplace culture where that fear of bad consequences for speaking up, for intervening, is truly outweighed by a shared immediate sense of responsibility? How do we make sure every single person feels empowered, feels it's okay, even expected to act?
That's a powerful question to leave things on, something for all of you to think about. How do these insights play out in your own environment? And what steps can you take to build that culture of collective responsibility?